Hello world! Frida Reba Darcy and Patricia O'Connor here. Our lights are down, our jets are cooling. And we're about to take a little step out onto the balcony. As some of you can see, I have some rather large, kind of a grande bonsai tree. Pretty big base. These guys. Those are some pretty big bonsai trees. As far as bonsai trees go, I don't remember the word in Japanese, but these are empire. These would be empire size bonsai trees. Why would a person want big bonsai trees? I mean, isn't the idea to have small trees? You could have big trees in your front yard. Yeah, I kind of get that. But on the other hand, people kind of, there's also a trend you see where people kind of, maybe when they think of bonsai, they have opinions. It's not like somebody told you that you can or you can't do something, but maybe when you got into bonsai, you thought, well, I live in Canada, so probably couldn't have a tropical. So the next thing you do, you have a million tropicals because it just struck you that might be difficult or a limitation, and you naturally would have grown towards it. Well, when I thought about what the limitations of bonsai for me would be in this apartment, I looked at my big trees on other people's videos, and I went, well, I can't have huge gargantuan, and I'm like, well, why the hell not, Pat? I mean, how big a trees is it you think you can't have in bonsai? Is there a size of bonsai trees that is above you? Actually, no. I mean, I've seen some really large cedars and some really large junipers and stuff. But if I wanted to bring those lights together and do some other little tricks and make this whole thing an alcove and put one of those right there, there's probably not much I couldn't do in the way of size. And that was kind of the attraction when I thought about what my limitations would be here in an apartment. I had already thought about cypress trees because I was raised around them. I had a connection with them. I think they have a soft elegance about them, while at the same time, I always thought those bases almost made them look like rockets or something. They just have that buttress and that flare, and then they have that soft foliage. There was a lot to enjoy about those growing up and admire about them growing up. And so it wasn't hard to be attracted to cypress trees. So big trees, like one of the first things I did was take a tape measure and measure the front door. And I don't remember what the width of the front door was, but I went there. That's your limitation. You don't want to have to turn a tree on its side to get it through the front door. So if it can sit on the floor and slide through a 7-foot opening, or whatever door openings are, 8 foot, whatever they are, and is wide enough to fit through here without having to do calisthenics, those are your limitations. So to that end, and I also partially blame Peter Hahn at Heron's Bonsai. He has a grove of, seems like they might be Japanese black pines, but they're formal, they're straight up. I think one of them died out at the top. They were in a very shallow container that was really beautiful. And I believe when I was watching that, he stated that after a couple of years, the top did die back because of the amount of distance it took to move the nutrients up to the top of that tree, and that wasn't as possible in the pot container that they had selected. And he didn't really do anything about that. It seemed like you could have chopped that dead, ginned or cut that. He ginned it, but I would have maybe cut it and put up a limb next to it, wired that up, and then potted it a little deeper. But it's still beautiful. But that was something that I was thinking about. That was had me looking for enormous bonsai pots, and this container is a training pot. It's mica, and I ordered that out of Florida at Weingart's. And they have a lot of cypress trees and stuff, but I didn't order any of their cypress trees. The two outside trees came from a grower in Louisiana who does mail order cypress trees and some other stuff that you can find out in that region. And the center one came on a buyer's list. I subscribed to a couple of blogs, and one of them has trees for sale, and one of them, in that same one, from time to time, has trees that are listed on a page that are friends of theirs. And that tree came up, and I nailed down that guy, and we talked turkey, and he brought it. So he brought it, and I bought it, and that was how that compilation came together. And that does satisfy my need to grow a large tree. But as a lot of you know, I also have some small trees. Mame is like 6 inches or something, and then smaller Shohan would be like bigger. Mame is smaller, and then smaller still would be the end of Mame that you call bean. And bean would be, instead of being that tall, if you could put more than one bonsai pot in your hand, if you can put 2 or 3 in your hand, then it's a bean. So some of these guys are beans. So we have some extreme examples. I would say we have some extreme examples of both here. My $50 challenge tree, buck 50, that's bean. This literati with a really huge top on it that looks a little bigger than it is, also is a bean, and it will look more bean-like as soon as it gets that candle pruned. We may put a little bit more wire on this tonight, just side note. So there's some really, really tiny trees. I would say, this is not the smallest. This is not the smallest bonsai tree for sure. And I've already shown. So I do have a spot in my heart for the larger trees. And what is to like about them is there is something about stature. And for me, there was probably a little bit of the forbiddenness about it, because it struck me when I got into bonsai, knowing that I had just sold a house not 6 months before that it didn't occur to me to do bonsai when I had a place to do bonsai. But now that I don't have a place to do bonsai, the first thing I wanted to do was bonsai. So I'm like, well, what the heck is with that, Pat? Why didn't you come around? Well, I always kind of thought I probably would, and now I can. And so this is what we made of it. And thinking of that as a restriction probably pretty much made me want to do that more. Large trees are easier to wire if you're into that. Now, that is to say, it will also take larger wire, so you're going to have stronger hands to wrap copper around some of these large limbs. As you can see, I haven't gone nuts on the motion. That's all straight as it can be. These are going to be 3 formal uprights. And if you ever see me do anything in the way of wire, it's usually to straighten it out more or to correct the lean that I think that it's doing. I tend to put a bamboo stake up every summer. So far I haven't yet this year, to make sure that it doesn't grow up and start leaning over and then harden off like that. They will do that, and it's not necessarily because of the light. It's just that they grow up tall enough that they're going to lean somewhere. But trees, bigger trees, in a lot of ways are easier to grow, which is to say that smaller trees are harder. I wouldn't necessarily say that big trees are easier, but I would say that smaller trees are more difficult. because if I were to say that big trees are easier, it's like, well, at what point do they get easier, Pat? These are cypress trees, and the My Bald Cypress are about as easy a bonsai. That and the wisterias are about as easy a bonsai tree as you could have. And because these are big trees, it will take years for this much trunk to encompass this much base. You know, I've got easily 3 or 4 years, if not more, ahead of me doing that. Same here. This one is a year behind that. This is going to look funny like this until this becomes so wide that it encompasses that area, and this carve begins to go away and this rollover begins to go away. So we have years ahead of us until that becomes taper, right? That's the bad side. It takes years to grow wounds, to grow wood, to grow bark, and to grow the finish work, or the kind of cuts and the kind of things that you have to do to pull off larger trees. This tree was snatched bare, but it had already had the main trunk work done. So just regrowing a canopy is going to take me 4 or 5 years to do that. That versus smaller trees. Shohin, Mame, Shohin, Mame, Bean. These guys, right off the top, for their size, they are harder to grow. I started growing the smaller trees before I even felt like I had a handle on their larger counterparts. And I lost quite a few of them in the beginning. But most of the trees that I lost in the beginning would have been those that I dug up on the grounds here. So I would either at the wrong time of year dig up little seedlings, maples or oaks, and put them in little pots, and they would go for a little while and die. I think the longest I had one was a year. I had an oak that I finally thought was going to make it, and when I put it on the rail and the wind picked up to 15 miles an hour, I believe that's when it packed up. So I would say the smaller trees have been harder. I learned one trick, and I learned it from a video, watching a video from somebody who kind of specializes in the smaller trees, and he's a local bonsai grower, Eric Schrader at Bonsai. He talked about taking the smaller pots and putting them in trays of substrate, trays of leftover soil, trays of cheaper soil, trays of something that won't cost you, an arm and a leg to do. You see, those are pie tins. It is sort of a project of mine to step this up from brownie tins to something more attractive. But right now, the brownie tins are doing fine, and they're doing a good job. It does a couple of things for you to do that. One, the little pots will get hot enough to kill roots in direct sun. They will not dissipate heat as well enough, nor will they fight off cold as well if they're in direct wind. So the little clay pots, the little clay bonsai or ceramic bonsai pots themselves are more susceptible to doing harmful things to your trees in either extreme condition. In that way, tray full of substrate helps. A lot of times you'll see that the soil in these trays is damp even when this gets dry, because the water that runs through this pot ends up in there, and they collect and hold water longer. So if the tree It's just kind of hanging in there off of the amount of water that you give it, and it could use a little more, but it's not necessarily getting it from you. And the seasons are changing, and maybe it's getting warmer, right? That root that comes out of the bottom of the pot that goes into that substrate, then that stays a little damper longer, is its hedge against the obstacles it faces by being a little tree in a tiny little pot in a big old universe. So that is I'm not doing that with the ones that are potted because that's not much of an issue, right? These guys won't have that to worry about. This comes with its own. I've wired this into there. The idea here is all of this can be exposed roots and all, but that's just talking about root work for pines. The tray is the idea when it comes to show hens. And across the board, I had better luck with my pines. I had better luck with my bougainvilleas. I had better luck with my oaks before I managed to kill them in the wind. As soon as I started putting my little smaller pots in trays of substrate. And I would feel better about it if they were better looking trays rather than brownie tins. But I don't think the trees mind either way. It does help the pots to stay cooler. It does help the pots to stay warmer, I suppose, on a super cold day. But if it were a cold day, I might give them a little twist and settle them down in there a little deeper to get them out of the wind. But that's kind of a small tree thing. If you've noticed, I tend to move these trees from here to here, and that's based on right now at lights out 30. The sun has already started past our balcony, is on that end of the sky, and is already a little bit past the eave of the building. You see that line is real. That's our shadow right there. Anything that's inside of that line is inside of the shadow. So the rest of the time of the day, these guys are in full sun and they tend to thrive here. That's why I'm seeing such that and the part where they were been getting fed all the way up until now is why we're seeing all of those lush colors in all these trees. Speaking of which, it's time to put out the goodies again. So they really love that sunny spot as long as it doesn't dry them out, and as long as they don't get wind burned. So, and little trees will wind burn. Even trees that are just not as susceptible to wind, they will still wind burn. I'm dropping some of these on the ground, on the deck, but I'll go back through and pick them up. And notice that I'm trying not to put any of these little biogold pellets in bonsai pots. Only in trees that are in regular containers and are not Japanese black pines. The ponderosas can get fed. They can get fed year round. I have a different feeding regimen for those guys. I've done a show on it. I probably will do another one on it before too long. It's you do them completely differently to get the results. You might look and think, well, that is the bonsai pot, and you're putting stuff in there. It's over potted. It's a training pot. Simply P still gets fed. This guy had its nutrient, but see how green those needles are. But we've already pulled up all the stuff, and that's why it's green and lush, is because of the presence of that. And in a little while, we're going to come through and cut candles, and then they will make a second flush of real pretty needles as well. And then after that, come fall, we'll be able to start feeding again. In the meantime, the guys that are in pots can be fed again. Mames are I would say that they are more impressive than the big trees. When you know, I mean, I'm not saying that these are necessarily. I'm not saying, look at these trees. Aren't they more impressive than the big trees? They're not. These are trees that are 11 months old. They don't exactly give the impression of age. There's no branching. But we just get our start. What I was talking about, building branch structure in 4 or 5 years, easily, if not more, with this guy, I'll have a pretty impressive tree in 3 or 4 years with these little guys. You can make a really, really neat little Mame or Shohin bonsai tree in 3 or 4 years. You're not going to get bark out of a tree just because you make it small sooner than it would normally grow bark. But you can make some pretty cool looking trees, and they get cooler quicker. And a very well done bonsai tree with a few years on it, I would say one of the priciest trees I've seen to date was a Shohin maple. I'm not sure what variety maple it was, but it was a Shohin maple, and it was absolutely would make you want to grow maples even if you had never looked at them. It was really a neat looking tree. So when you see really, really well done Mame and Shohin trees that have a little bit of years on them, don't look here. All of these guys are green as grass. It is so impressive, and it's its own league, and they're very rewarding to grow. I have really been enjoying the work that the videos that we've made and the work that we've done with all of these trees. That was 10 at a time. That was just an awful lot of fun, and I believe I learned a lot, and I believe we got more than a few good trees out of this, and it's going to be really fun to see how they move along. But as a girl with a balcony, I see me as doing more and more and more Mame. I've already shown y'all that I've done a round of seeds. I've got about 11 growing out of our ill-fated lost squadron that were knocked out by the birds. So I'm going to let those 11 get to an age where they could survive outside, where they're not at the age where the birds seem to like them, where they're not pluckable bean sprouts. And I'll bring them out here, and they'll occupy their place on the rack, and then in the underneath the fluorescent, we'll start another 20 or so and start bringing more and more little Japanese black pines into the fold. So yeah, I think last time we had a really pretty good time popping and propagating the seeds. We just fed most of our little baby trees to the birds. So we'll do that in our kitchen. They'll have to be B&E birds in order to get them after that. So yeah, this is my little spill on tiny trees versus big trees. Oh, the other thing, when it comes to the Japanese black pines, overwatering is a big deal, and when it comes to the ponderosas, even more so. But when you start dealing with smaller and smaller trees and smaller amounts of roots, that you get to water these guys once a day, more than not, when you might be going 4 or 5 days with your larger trees. Sometimes I'll water this 2 times a week, sometimes I'll water this 4 times a week, depending on how warm it is. And I'm still doing the little trick where I rake it back. Today it got watered, but this is at the age where, at the size where it still gets watered almost every day, which is not necessarily a pine tree thing. It's a pine tree that size and that size pot thing. So yeah, like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. Our next drop will be, well, I know I'm going to be bringing something in and putting a little lard to it tonight. And there's that cough I've been trying to hold back for about 2 minutes. So yeah, we're gonna bring in a little Literati pine, that one, and I'll probably wire the last top pads that had up until now been a little small. And I really do enjoy my Empire trees. The big side to having big trees is, for me, I don't have to have a finished product to be absolutely happy with them. But at the same time, it is going to take a minute until they're done. You know, I will probably be so far into Japanese black pines by that time, I might not even notice when they're at their peak, which, I don't know, that would be a miss up moment to smell the roses, I suppose. But I do love these. They're beautiful. But we evolve and grow. That's kind of what I'm saying. Maybe your first project shouldn't be something that's going to take you 15 years, because you may want to move on before you get there. I gotta say, I haven't really had that when it comes to the Bald Cypress. I kind of have had that when it came to my Trident Maple. I invented a lot of work for myself that I'd have to do to make that the tree I want it to be. And then when it came right down to it, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really up to doing all that. So I'm just going to let it fill back out and act like I didn't have any harebrained ideas at all. That's kind of where, but that's another nice size tree. But yeah, that's where we go. So thank you so much for watching.